I'm good. All right, everybody. It is just at 6 o'clock here. It's actually 6:03, so we're starting a little bit late. So, Mary, will you do the roll call?
Burnett,
Present.
Carter,
Here.
Neal,
Here.
Tasalakwa, Patterson,
Here.
Paul, Smeltzer,
Here.
Thorsland, and Yukon.
Here. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight. We've got Jacob Paul, I believe, is going to be, he's either with us or he's going to be with us here in a couple minutes. So we are unfortunately are not going to wait. We've got a number of things to cover tonight. So the minutes of our September 16th meeting were emailed out with a meeting notice. We'll need a roll call vote to approve those, but first we'll need a motion, et cetera, to approve those.
So move, Carter.
Second, Paul.
Jacob Paul's a second. Mary, you'll do the roll call again.
Okay, you ready for the roll call?
Yes, please.
Brad, I can't hear you.
Yes, we are ready for the roll call. I'll give you the thumbs up.
Okay, Burnett,
Yes.
why can't I hear anybody?
So perhaps
Okay,
Mary
is
is
she speaking? I can't hear anybody at this point.
Yeah, Mary's having the challenges on her end, which Mary is here at Brookins, on hearing any of us.
Hey, Brad, this is MC, sir. I see that Randall is sitting right behind you. Would you mind telling him to pop down to Mary's desk, see if he can see what's going on with her audio?
He is on his way.
All right, thank you. Also, I sent him some messages, but he may not have gotten it. If you don't mind, sir, can you mute the microphone you're using and use your headset instead? On Zoom, if it's going through that microphone you're using, it's gonna highlight that Brookins is talking instead of you. So if anyone has it on speaker view, whenever you're talking, they're not gonna see you. They're gonna see the shield. So if you could put that headset on and use that.
Yep, just going with what Randall had told me to do, so no problem.
Thank you, sir. Now you will have to unmute yourself, sir. Sorry.
Brad, you need to unmute.
Should be an option in the Zoom window, bottom left-hand corner.
All right, gotcha.
There you go.
So
Thank you, sir.
we're still waiting on the roll call for the minutes.
How about a friendly amendment to just approve by a show of hands? Unanimous approval.
You'd think they'd make the rules that sensible, but unfortunately with the OMA rules for remote meetings, every vote has to be a roll call.
Okay.
Can somebody else take the roll call?
Brad, can you take the roll call?
I have no idea on that, if that can do that.
I think it probably needs to be the clerk.
In the meantime, while we're waiting on Mary, let's come back to that a minute. Any public participation?
I can hear.
All right, Mary, you ready for the roll call then to approve the minutes?
Okay, we didn't do the agenda though either, did we? So we can do the
You're
minutes and
right.
we can do the minutes since we've had the motion and then do the agenda. So,
Sure.
okay. Okay, Burnett,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Neal,
Yes.
Pasalakwa. Here, Patterson,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Smeltzer,
Yes.
Thorsland, Yukon.
Yes.
Okay.
All right. How about approval of the agenda? Do I have a motion in a second?
So move, Carter.
Agenda.
Is there a second?
Second, Paul.
Second, Paul. Mary, you'll call the roll.
Okay, Burnett,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Neal,
Yes.
Pasalakwa, Patterson,
Yes.
Paul,
Yes.
Smeltzer,
Yes.
Yukon.
Yes. All right, so we've got those things out of the way. Public participation. I didn't hear any, but I'll ask one more time. Any public participation?
Brad, we have somebody in the attendee side of the meeting that has their hand raised. So I think I can. Let's see what I need to do here. I'm not a meeting host. Whoever is a meeting host, they can unmute them so that they can speak. Which I don't know if Randall, if you can do that.
Hello, my name is Joseph Dewald. I just wanted to make sure if I understood this correctly. As soon as this portion of the meeting is over, I have to change over to this YouTube channel to continue watching the meeting.
That is, I believe, the recommendation that you do that. Yes.
I believe we can also move him back to the attendee side. He can watch, but he wouldn't be able to speak. If that's wrong, MC will correct me.
That is correct, ma'am. The having public sign off is a older setup that we had. Right now, we are fine with public just staying in as an attendee and removing their rights to speak.
Is that what, Mr. DeWalt, is that what your public participation was, just for that question, or?
Yes, sir. At this point, I've only read the documents. I've been looking at the stuff. I was not aware of this meetings beforehand, so at this point, I just want to watch, but I just want to make sure I was doing it correctly. So.
Thank you, Mr. DeWalt, for joining us, and thanks for spending some time reading the documentation. We appreciate that. Is there any other public participation? All right, since I see none, we will talk about communications. A couple documents were sent out in advance. Mr. Smeltzer, you sent out a document about some upcoming meetings. We'll just consider that communication at this point, if that works for you.
Sure, that's fine. I think I sent that to Mary, and I think she forwarded it with
Yeah.
the Zoom invite today.
Yep, so we'll consider that communication. All right, then we're under new business. I just wanted to go over a few things to make sure we were on the same page. I believe our consultant is with us, so but let's make sure we have a few things. So the agreement was signed with Finley Consulting Group and CCG Consulting. I should say Finley Engineering. I'm sorry to get that wrong. So that document is signed. Darlene took care of that. The contract is not to exceed $85,000 with about a 4 or 5 month completion process. Their portion of the agenda, they'll be joining us at 6:30, or at least that's my plan, for them to kind of take over. So we've got about 15 minutes to get through a number of other items here. But again, if you want a copy of that, I'm sure Darlene can get that shared with you. It is a public document at this point. I put together just a brief PowerPoint. I think Mary's can pull that up. And so that everybody can see that. So I just wanted to go over a couple things that are kind of basic to kind of make sure we're all on the same page. Mary, the second slide there. So of course, with the ARPA funds, these are the interim final rules. These are not the final rules yet. Now, we are operating as if they could be final. The federal government has not put any time frame out there of when they will make them final, but they are only interim final rules. The funds that the county received, and this would not just be for broadband related projects, this would be for anything. Funds must be allocated by 12/31/24 and expended by 12/31/26. When we talk specifically about broadband speed, and there's really two numbers that are often referenced. One is download speed, and this is really the first of two numbers that you see when referencing that speed. And that's really how fast you get information from the internet to your device. And then the second number that you typically see is that upload speed, which is information from your device to the internet, so the opposite way. So the next couple points here I've got, you'll see some quotation marks around certain words. Those are directly, those words that are in quotation are exactly how it is stated in the ARPA fund or the ARPA interim final rules. So ARPA projects are expected to deliver 100 upload and 100 download speeds, or sometimes called 100 symmetrical speeds. When not practicable, at least 120 megabytes per second is allowed, but the project must be scalable to 100 and 100. And I think that's a key fact for all of us to remember, is that as we get into this process, the goal is 100 and 100. You can be short of that, but the project has to be scalable to get to that. Mary, next slide, please. Projects are encouraged to prioritize fiber optic infrastructure where feasible. Projects are expected to focus on locations that are unserved or underserved. That is defined very specifically as lacking access to at least 25 and 3 megabytes per second. Projects are encouraged to integrate affordability options into their program design, and projects should prioritize last mile efforts. So I think that's another key aspect as we move forward with this. And then I think the last one there is projects are encouraged to be owned, operated by, or affiliated with local governments, nonprofits, and cooperative providers. Next slide, please. So a lot of times as we move forward on this, there's going to be kind of some some basics here, and again, wanting to make sure we're all on the same page. When we talk about a wire line, that refers to a physical cable that's going to bring that connection to your home. Wireless, of course, is going to be the opposite. That may come from a satellite or a radio signal from a tower or a tall structure. And a lot of times right now in the rural areas of the county, I can tell you that's how a lot of individuals are getting their internet connection. And then, of course, hybrid would be a combination of the two. Mary, the last slide. At our first meeting, we talked a little bit about easements. So I wanted to make sure we were on the same page when we talked some about easements. And easements are granting of permission by a landowner, in this case, a utility, to place an overhead or underground utility line across their property, typically for a fee. That second point talks there about interstates and state routes, in that really the right of way is there and exists, and they really don't need to talk to neighboring landowners for permission to install a utility. But when we talk about county and rural roads, most of the cases, a vast majority of those cases, only an easement is in place for a road for transportation purposes. So what that means is the last bullet point there is that in those cases, the adjacent landowner owns to the middle of the road for anything except road use purposes and must be consulted with for an easement for utility installation in the right of way. So in other words, it was again mentioned at our last meeting talking about installation of fiber in the rural areas. And we have heard, the county board has heard from a number of providers, the challenges that brings, because you have to get easements when you're running in the rural areas, you have to get easements from individual landowners. And that can be a process, but it also should not be considered a hindrance. It can be done and has been done by utilities for decades. So there's some basic things I wanted to cover. Mr. Smeltzer, I should ask any questions on what I had. Mr. Smeltzer, you had also put together, that was included with the agenda packet, you had that numbered 1 through 25 or so, talking about fiber. Why don't you take the next 5 or 10 minutes, Mr. Smeltzer, and talk a little bit about what you shared when we talk a little bit about fiber. So again, maybe we're all starting from the same point.
Sure. I figured we would not have enough time to go deeply into fiber, so I sent it out in written format ahead of time. The main thing you need to know about fiber is it requires a tremendous amount of planning. The Finley engineers that are with us will probably agree with that. You can't just tap into a fiber line the same way you can tap into a water line or tap into an electrical line. Unless you've designed, if you have fiber in your front yard, unless a fiber was designed to serve your house in that cable, it isn't going to happen. So we need to have a vision, or at least a plan, and our consultants will help us get there, of how we want to end this up. And when we build a fiber backbone, because no matter what we do, we're going to need a fiber backbone, we need to make sure that we have some future needs involved in that. So I'm going to get my face off of here and share my screen here for a second. I don't have a, let's see here, desktop number 2. Share. Is that sharing now? You see some fiber? Okay. A lot of people have never seen the insides of a fiber cable, and that's just fine. They're actually kind of dangerous. You're supposed to wear eye protectors when you're looking at them. Little bits of the cable can come off. This is obviously a very big blow up, but some of the cables I'm going to talk about tonight are only 1.5 or a half inch in diameter, and they can have 432 strands in them. So that's a lot of fiber, and you can do a lot of things with that. But when you have a big cable like that, you also have to splice it. Every time you have 2 cables that talk to, that butt up against each other for one reason or another, all 432 of those strands, if it's that big of a cable, have to be spliced to the same strand in the other cable. It's a lot of time and effort and work going into it. Our goal would probably be to build enough strands into the backbone system so that we can deal with what we think the need is going to be today and maybe looking ahead 10 years, but leave some spare capacity, because there's, 20 years from now, our sons and daughters are going to be saying mean things about us because we didn't think ahead enough to put enough fiber strands in, or we didn't put enough duct in. And I can take it, but our grandkids will get around to, being mean about us. We can't possibly build too much future capacity into it, other than there's some cost in building that future capacity. And so we're going to have to balance what are our needs now, what are we trying to accomplish now, and hopefully have some budget left over for future needs. And it won't bite us in the butt this year, and maybe not next year, but 10 years from now, or 20, 30 years down the line. And this is a 30, 40-year investment we're making. These conduits will last, longer than cockroaches. The fiber strands themselves, there's fiber in the ground now that's been there for 30 years and it's still working just fine. Some of the original fiber got cloudy every time it froze and every time it thawed. Over time, it got cloudy and it didn't perform as well. But we're not going great distances here. If we went from the middle of Champaign-Urbana to the farthest reach of the county, that's under 50 miles for sure, and it's probably under 30 miles. So by fiber standards, these are relatively short distances. So what we put in now is going to last a very long time, and we need to be thinking, and we need to challenge our consultant to have a plan for the future as we go forward. I was a little disappointed that ARPA wants to talk about last mile connections, because we got a lot of people to connect last mile, and they're all spread out. And no matter how you run the numbers, we don't have that much money. And I doubt the county board is willing to allocate all of their existing funds to make this happen. Now, if they are, great. We can maybe talk about that, but that's a political decision, not my bailiwick. But we need to be designing for the future. This is what a typical 144 fiber strand cable looks like. There's buffer tubes that each have 12 strands in them. There's 12 buffer tubes. They're all a common set of colors. The fiber strands inside have coatings to them, and those use those same 12 colors. So if Brad's at one end, if he's at one end of a fiber cable and I'm 5 miles down the road and I'm saying, hey, Brad, I need you to splice this cable into your house here. It's an orange buffer tube and it's the blue strand. You'll be able to go exactly to that strand in that buffer tube and know exactly what I'm talking about. This is old telecom stuff when they used to have a whole lot of copper cables and they had to identify them. When you get a bigger cable, they use some more sophisticated numbering schemes for the buffer tubes, but the idea of the 12 basic colors is pretty standard. If I had been done this more for a living, I could tell you what those colors are in order. I know people who can repeat them in their sleep, but that's not important. There's also a technology called microduct, and this is what I was talking about, the really small cable. This is a 2-inch duct, but it actually has 7 compartments to put a fiber cable in. The Northern Illinois University did a project 10 years ago where they used microduct for all of their backbone, and I believe they only used 1 or 2 ducts for their initial purpose. And the hard part with the fiber duct is once you put it in the ground and you pull a big cable into it, it's really hard to get the second cable into it. And sometimes it's almost impossible to get a second cable, especially if you're trying to make it go a couple of miles at a shot. These basically give you a clear pathway for future cables. And the companies are now making fiber that's not as protected as a regular fiber cable, because it doesn't need to be, because it's in these subducts within there. So you could literally have over 3,000 strands of cable in this, and you can do it in 432 strand increments. So maybe we only need 256 strands to start. Well, we use 1 duct for that, and we leave the others, for the future. They don't have to be 7. There's 4 microducts. There's 2 microducts. Somewhere there is, these ones with 12 and 30. We don't need anything like that. But something somewhere between 4 and 7, or maybe 7, would be a good number for us to use, because it may be that all we need to do is run a 72 to do what we're initially talking about doing, and we're leaving a lot of capacity for the future, but we haven't spent all the money on that fiber. We've allotted some manholes to do it, but microducts could be a good solution for us, or just putting in a big honking cable in the first time, or putting in a second empty cable. UCB attempted to put in a second empty cable everywhere on the backbone network. We ran out of money, and that was the one thing that got sacrificed. Although anytime we crossed a railroad, anytime we went under an interstate, any of the really hard and expensive things to do, you better believe we put in a second duct, and I think sometimes we put in a third duct, just because getting permission to go back and do that again is a $50,000 deal. But putting a second duct right next to where a duct already exists is kind of dangerous, because if you're using a plow, you run the risk of plowing up the first one. Or if you're using a boring machine, you run the risk of getting your boring rig caught up in the first duct. So getting the duct in the ground the first time for the backbone and for whatever technology we're going to use for getting fiber to the home is important. And we're going to have to decide between big fiber cables or maybe an extra duct or a microduct sort of solution. I haven't been doing this actively for a little while, so Finley may have there may be something else I don't even know about, and that's entirely possible. But we need to be thinking about expansion, because this is, again, a once in a lifetime opportunity to get a backbone built that'll serve the entire county, and that's important. And I'm willing to take some questions if people have questions. Better unshare, stop sharing. Yeah.
Any questions for Mike? Otherwise, Mike, it's a great start to kind of helping us understand how fiber or cable kind of looks and can work.
Uh-oh.
Thanks, Mike. I don't have a, sorry. Tried to raise my hand earlier, Brad, sorry.
Gotcha.
Not a question for Mike, but thanks for the information, Mike. But for you, Brad, when you were speaking on the easements, what has been your experience with in our county and in the rural areas with easements being approved by the landowners? I mean, is this something we need to be concerned with, or is it pretty much, the large majority of them will just give us a head nod, or?
It typically is a process. And so it's a two-way street. If the utility company, typically, if they're willing to work with the landowner and approach them and talk to them about what they want to do and try to be fair with them, usually it happens. But I also know instances where, I'll say it, a couple years ago, there was down in the Sedoris area, I got a call from a landowner who basically said they're drilling across, or they're boring across my property. They went and talked to the company. They said, we don't need an easement to do this. They did need an easement. They later admitted, we don't have one, but we've got a job to do, and we're going to go through your property without your permission. That landowner ended up calling the sheriff's department. They got an injunction to stop the project. So if you start off, as with anything, you start off on the wrong foot, you're not going to get very far. But if you're willing to talk to the landowners and present them a fair option and explain what you're going to do and have good communication, it's all doable.
Thank you, sir.
Samantha, you also had your hand raised.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that presentation. Also, I had a question about the easement too. Is that a one-time fee? The easement fee?
It can vary. It depends on the project. I know different projects have done things differently throughout history, so it varies. Some projects it's a one-time fee to go through your property. There's been some others that landowners have negotiated a kind of a multi-year fee for it.
Okay. And then my second question was from Mr. Mike Smeltzer. Thank you for the math too. I got, and it says the proposed UC to be grant funded construction for 2022, May 21st, 2021. Can you tell me, or can you kind of break this down? I kind of can understand it, but I'm kind of lost on it. But basically, can you give me a percentage of how much of the county already has the fiber optics. And what was my other question? Oh, I just had a brain fart. Okay, what percentage of Champaign County already have fiber optics installed from the UC2B project? Thank you.
I don't know if we know that number. My guess is that ultimately Finley will produce that number for us as part of their report. UC2B has pretty much been concentrated within Champaign-Urbana. So how much of the county on a landmass basis? Well, what's 50 square miles out of 1,000? It's not very big. On a population basis, it's more than half. So not every home in Champaign-Urbana has access to UC2B fiber, but there are backbone fibers that make that possible in all those areas. The areas on that map, and I'm forgetting my color scheme, but the areas that I3 has already built into, those people have access today, they're up and running. The areas that UC2B is proposing for 2022, that's pretty hypothetical at this point. Neither the city of Champaign nor the city of Urbana has stepped up and said, yes, we want to use some of our ARPA funds to accelerate construction in these areas. We're going to ask them to do that, but we don't have a commitment. I3 is continuing to build fiber using their own money. And I would expect them to continue to build some more fiber next year in Champaign-Urbana as well. They're in other communities. There's a company called Pavlov. They spoke to our meeting at the county board several months ago. They're building fiber in parts of Champaign-Urbana right now. AT&T is actually building some fiber. And a company called Volo, who they also spoke at our meeting a couple of months ago. They have built some fiber. But that's all Champaign-Urbana related at this point. Now, Volo has built fiber, I believe, in St. Joe, and they've built in Thomasboro. Pavlov has built in Mahomet, and maybe they're going towards Fisher. I don't think anybody can answer that question definitively right now, but that's something we need to know, the county board needs to know, and eventually, I hope that's one of the questions we will put to Finley and say, we need to know what this looks like. But it's a small percentage in terms of geography. There's fiber all over the place, but it's not designed to bring fiber to your home or to Brad's farm or wherever it was going to go. That's really the work that needs to be done.
Yeah, I just got that question. I'm sorry. For clarification purposes, your presentation that you just showed us with the fibers, adding them, we can. I guess my question is, our project can be compatible to whatever fiber is out there right now. Is that correct?
Yes, there are two kinds of fiber. There's the kind of fiber, it's called multi-mode fiber. You use it in a building, maybe in a data center. You don't use it for long distances. There's also fiber called single mode fiber, which can go from here to Chicago or under the ocean all the way across continents and so forth. That's the kind of fiber that's out there. But it's not just a matter of putting the fiber together. There has to be electronics. There have to be sharing agreements. One of the things that I put on the table for everybody 2 months ago was that UC2B has fiber that rings Champaign-Urbana. And that's a logical place for a county project to come together and get access to the internet. And I3 currently runs that fiber and maintains that fiber, but they're a pretty good group to work with. They may be very willing to cooperate with a project going forward to make sure that the county doesn't have to pay for a connection to Chicago or a connection to St. Louis or Indianapolis or put in fiber, God's sakes, to get there. That fiber already exists. There's no reason not to take advantage of that bandwidth and to take advantage of the fact that the UC2B original network was built right out at the edges of the developed parts of the city to enhance. My original maps had little lines that went to St. Joe and a line that went to Mahomet and one that went south and one that went up towards Paxton and Rantoul. That was kind of always the plan, get Champaign-Urbana built, then expand out to the county. I'm not going to live long enough to see that happen perhaps, but that was always the idea. And the first part of the building block is there.
All right, Samantha, did we get your question answered there?
Yes, thank you so much.
Mike, did you have a question?
I started out, I was going to talk just briefly about easements, and I won't use anybody's name this time. We had to deal with easements for UC2B because we put fiber out in the rural areas that surrounded Champaign-Urbana. There is a particular landlord and farm operator in the Champaign County who hates easements and refuses to ever cooperate with them. We had to build our maps so that we didn't ever go anywhere close to that landlord's property. In some cases, they own property on the west side of the road, we went on the east side of the road. In other cases, they own property on both sides of the road, we didn't go down that road. And it made our life very difficult. It was a week of planning just to figure out how to avoid that landlord. So they're all over the place. Some of them are wonderful to work with, some absolutely refuse to work with you. And I hope that on this particular project where we're trying to do something that benefits the rural community, that the rural community would, get behind this and say, okay, this is a good thing for me, and this is a good thing for my neighbors. I want the service. And the only way that's going to happen is if they grant easements to get the service to their homes.
So that will be part of the process moving forward. It's a few steps ahead of us, but it is something for all of us to kind of keep in mind as we have discussions about this. So with that, I want to keep moving on the agenda, but before I do want to clarify something that I misstated. The contract that Finley has as a completion date of January 31st, 2022. So I overstated the exact completion time frame on that. So my apologies. So with that, Sean, your name is on the contract as the one who signed it. So you may have others on here that are part of your team, but I'm going to start with you since you're the one who signed the agreement with the county. So Sean, it's all you.
Very good. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Very good. Thank you all for the invitation and opportunity as well. And I will introduce a couple of Finley people that are with me here today. But we very much thank everybody for this opportunity. And the main thing I would kind of tell you as a background for those of you that may not be familiar with us is Finley Engineering has been in business since the 50s. And I think the thing that I'd want to leave you with, if anything, is that Finley started as both an energy and a telecommunications engineering consultancy. And when we got into this, we've been doing this now for decades, but I think my point is that we build fiber networks, we design, engineer, project manage, and do all the way through construction, completion type engineering services. That's our core to do that work. Well, several years back, we got into this kind of feasibility planning, and by partnering with CCG Consulting, which my colleague is going to talk more about here as well, we've put together what we believe is one of the kind of premier partnerships because we understand how to build these networks, and that's actually our core skill set is how to design, integrate, and do the things you guys are talking about, dealing with the integration with the design, the number, the fiber counts, the best way to put that in, the duct planning, all those things. That's our forte. But we've now created this kind of expertise, if you will, with our partnership with CCG. So now we're able to move into knowing from the high level how to assess your areas, do a good job of looking through your demographics and doing all the market analysis, all those things that would position you well for success. So I kind of just want to lay that groundwork that that's kind of us in general. That's what we do. This is what we do for a living. And I do want to introduce both my counterparts. I don't know which one of you guys want to talk first a little, but I have Dean Mishki and Andy Hines, both of Finley Engineering. Which one of you wants to take a turn first?
Actually, Dean, why don't you go ahead and then I'll kind of wrap up and cover CCG as well.
Perfect.
Thank you. My name is Dean Mishki. I've been with Finley since 1990 and actually been designing fiber optic networks from about 2 months after I started. So been doing it a little bit. A lot of good comments, a lot of good conversation earlier on with Mr. Huken and Mr. Smeltzer on their introductions. One of the things that as Sean related is we've been doing fiber since it's been around. Our company's actually been doing fiber since the mid 80s in the long haul. We built about 15 to 30% of AT&T and Sprint's long-haul networks across the United States. Lately, our focus has been on fiber to the home, and that's been my primary study for the last 20 years. One of the things that I think we bring that some folks don't bring to it is that we work with service providers as our core also. We know what it takes to build a reliable network, and we know the cost that it takes to get that built in real terms. And it'll be specifically tailored to your area, not just a average across the United States study, but it will take that into account. And we have a lot of information to back that up. Finley is very active in the state of Illinois. So, we're not some place out in the weeds away from you. We are in your neighborhoods. The other part, Mr. Smeltzer talked about easements and what have you. They do become easier when you can perceive a public good. Most of the easements that have been dealt with in fiber in the past has been somebody wanting to go through that gives that owner no benefit. And so I think this is a case where you sincerely get a very strong marketing campaign going to encourage people to understand that this is a local thing. This isn't some long haul thing that never going to touch them. It's theirs. And I don't know of anyone here in the last year that could say, you know what, we don't need better broadband to help our kids or grandkids or whatever do better in school. So I think you're going to have an easier way to go with that. As far as technologies, we've been very active. One of the things we've learned is that if you want to design a network and you want to try to look at how to future-proof it, follow the money. We watch what all these companies are spending on their research and development, and that's where we look to see where the technology is headed, not what somebody's just popped up with a flash in the pan solution. We look at ITU, which is the International Telegraph Union, that is the standards bearer for GPON. We look at IEEE, which is the standards bearer for active fiber. And we watch what those industries are doing with their money spent. So our goal is to help design a network that is as resilient, and I'm going to use that word resilient rather than future-proof, than other vendors may be looking at. Because as we all know, the future is still a clouded ball, but at least we're basing our decisions on where we know people are spending the money and where the development is going. So I'll leave it at that and turn it over to Andy to talk about our counterpart, I guess.
Great. Thanks, Dean. So I think I typically probably wouldn't have been involved in this call, but Doug Dawson with CCG Consulting. He is the owner and principal of CCG. He gave me a shout this morning and said he had a family emergency come up and wouldn't be able to make this meeting. So kind of stepping in for Doug on a little bit of CCG and then also a bit on behalf of Finley here too. So first, cover a little bit of Finley and then I'll grab CCG. So I've been with Finley since 2009. Prior to that, I was actually the general manager of a small telephone company in Missouri and actually deployed full fiber to the home in 2006. So much of my operational and even my consulting life has been grounded in, much like Dean, design and understanding of network and the components, but also understanding the operational, legal, regulatory, all the other ugly, gory things that come along with an operational network. So lots of background and experience of a lot of wounds based on earning them from having done a lot of work. And those are some of the other things we bring, when we start talking to clients is this isn't just theoretical or the books. We've been doing this long enough to actually see the good, bad, and the ugly from the inception of some of this technology and kind of follow things through, especially as, Mr. Smeltzer commented on the ability to grow and be able to augment these networks and not have to forklift overbuild them because of poor planning. We've seen things like that from early iterations of fiber networks, and it's kind of ugly to kind of rehab one to make it work. So lots of things we see just based on experience. Regarding CCG Consulting, Doug Dawson has been consulting with a wide variety of broadband operators since 1997. Much of his practice has been based on working with municipal and public entities. He's probably done more feasibility studies and helped more, I guess, quasi-political, or what I call quasi-political entities implement fiber networks since that time. He's based in North Carolina. Absolutely wonderful to work with. And if I remember correctly, he helped way back in the BTOP days on some of the network that has already been put in the Champaign-Urbana area there. So very, very familiar with things that have already been done there, and familiar with the area from work he has done previously. So like Dean and Sean, appreciate some of the early information here from Mr. Yukin, Mr. Smeltzer, and a lot of the questions from Ms. Carter. That was all great. Great information and dialogue from stakeholders, which is, I think, from my perspective, a very, very welcome discussion that we don't always get when we venture off into a new project like this. So good information to start with, everyone. And I think I'll leave it there for introductions and see which way we want to go next.
All right, Sean, how about if you could, Sean, could give us a brief overview of what your scope of services are going to be?
Yes, and all of us will probably chime in a bit on this. And I apologize. I take for granted I didn't give you my background, but I've been in electric utility background, but been involved in telecommunications most of that time. We were one of these utility entities that got in and did. My resume looks like Randy's. We built a network from scratch, both fixed wireless and fiber to the prem. So same thing. And I came over to Finley. I've only been there 2 years, but the thing I bring is, again, I've actually sat in the seat and operationally controlled and commanded and designed these networks myself as an operator, and then came over, and now I'm helping with the consultancy side. But so the main thing here then is, kind of looking at it from an overarching perspective is, of course, we see the county has this, and listening to your discussion actually went kind of apropos to the discussion that you have Urbana, Champaign, within your county, and there is resource, but it looks like as far as a scope from our response and reading through your needs, that you're looking for more of a holistic plan that's going to find a way to get to all parts of the county. Is that correct? Is that a correct assumption, kind of from a whole high level?
Yeah, I think from an overall goal, I would say that that's correct.
Yep. And so, we're going to be kind of approaching this, and part of the parts that Doug Dawson, we'll start this design. That's Dean's team is probably going to be taking the lead to come up with the design that kind of forms the basis that we know we're going to consider the homes passed, make sure that we've accounted for all the stakeholders, and come with a best fit design methodology to best utilize the funding that you have available to the county. That'll be one part, and then kind of right towards the end of that, correct, Andy and Dean, right towards the end of that process is when Doug's team will be coming in and starting that assessment, that analysis of the marketplace, and even all the other pieces that we kind of talked about in our documentation, which really involves surveying what you mentioned it, who else is out there, what speeds are available to people, who has access, what's served, underserved, unserved, all those kinds of things. That'll be part of that analysis project that when we end up with a final result report that comes with the Finley effort, not only will it show a plan that can consider where fiber is going to get to everywhere, but it'll also show you the lay of the land and how that's going to dovetail with identifying who's out there and what's available. Anything to add?
Yeah, Sean, I'll tag on to the back of that. Doug is actually fairly busy right off the start. While we're working on the slogging through the trenches, so to speak, Doug will be getting with the stakeholders and coordinating a survey that he's going to send out. He's got a very good statistical method for running the survey, and then also helping to identify some of the key stakeholders and looking at what's there. One of the things with all of these proposals, we get the request to a document where everybody's at. in terms of existing broadband facilities. And one of the things that becomes extremely hard with that is most of those companies consider that to be a trade secret. So other than seeing the signs along the road and what have you, we'll know areas that they're in and we'll know areas that they're marketing in, but to identify every fiber route throughout the county is going to be virtually impossible. Mr. Uken, you had talked about it earlier on, is that with the various large entities, be it iFiber and some of these others that had put fiber throughout the county, those are really point-to-points to get to someplace else. And you're correct, they really don't work for local distribution. So even though we may identify where they're all at, it really doesn't help you much because you need to have enough in place to bring back local distribution. Now, we may be able to use some of the duct if that exists, but usually there's not enough fiber or it's going in the wrong direction for what we need. When you start looking at the fine distribution, getting down to every customer, your directions of feeds and your methodology changes dramatically from a point to point. On a point to point, you need to get to those 2 points, you find the shortest path. Now you have to find the shortest path in 1,000 square miles, as someone once said here. So the directions of feed and the directions you move fiber are radically different. So both teams are going to be pretty busy all the way along. I know that we early on, we prepare maps for Doug where he will take and the information that we compile, be it from the federal government, FCC, USDA, and state sources of where broadband is and is not. And we compile all of that into maps that he can run analysis against. Well, we're looking at how do we connect every person to the network. So it will be a get up and run process all the way through to the end of our study for both teams.
How about, I should have did this in the very beginning, and guys, so I apologize, Sean, Dean, and Andy. I should have done introductions of our committee. So Samantha, if you hold just a second with your question. I'm Brad Euchen, I'm chair of the committee. I work for the Champaign County Farm Bureau and live in the unincorporated areas of the county. Mike, why don't you go? I see you're kind of next on my screen.
It does help to unmute the mic. I'm Mike Smeltzer. I used to be the director of networking at the university and was involved in the UCDB project from the beginning, which built 150, 200 miles of fiber backbone throughout Champaign-Urbana and is now serving about half the community. I have retired from the university and I'm still kind of keeping my hand in it. I'm still on the UCDB board and have gotten involved in this effort as well.
Jacob Paul is sitting here over my shoulder. If Jacob, you're behind me there. So Jacob, you're up.
My name is Jacob Paul, the county board rep for Muhammad. Also incorporated here to help out if I can. I'm not great at the technical side of it. Thank you for helping us out.
Kyle.
Brad, sorry, Brad, couldn't hear Jacob. I think he's still muted.
Did it work out? Yeah, just Jacob Paul from District 1. Thank you guys for your time helping out. Hopefully I can help with easements or anything you need in your local. Thank you for your time.
Kyle, why don't you go next?
Kyle Patterson. I'm the county board chair, and I live in the city of Champaign.
MC?
MC Neal, Chief Information Officer with Champaign County, pretty much take care of all the day-to-day IT services and products. Been in IT for about 15 years. And yeah, looking forward to doing some great work here on this committee.
Samantha.
Hi, Samantha Carter, District 6 representative. I'm a small business owner. I'm definitely interested in this project happening, and I'm very thankful for all that's involved. Thank you so much.
Stephanie?
Hello, everyone. I'm Stephanie Burnett. I'm the MTW Client Outreach Manager with the Housing Authority of Champaign County. I also live in a rural community. So my interest in this project stems from not only my work with serving the low income families in the county, but also living in an area where access is limited. We don't have many options out here in Rantoul. So that's my involvement in this project.
All right, did I get everybody or did I miss somebody? All right. Again, guys, I apologize. Sean, Dean, and Andy, we should have done that from the beginning. I had that written down and didn't do it. So before we got into introductions, Samantha, you had your hand raised for a question.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify something. It says Mr. Sean Middleton, but it's the guy with the blue shirt right here on my right. Just for clarification purposes, are you saying basically any prior fiber may be useless? Or?
And I think all three of our sign-ins say Sean Middleton. I'm Sean Middleton.
Oh, okay,
we shared a login. So,
yeah.
And Dean, you made that comment. We were talking about the long haul fiber instead of. You're muted, Dean.
And that was Samantha that had asked the question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Good afternoon, Samantha. Usually when we look at long haul fiber routes, the cable sizes are much smaller in terms of number of fiber. In the case of iFiber with the multiple ducts that I can't remember if it was Mr. Yukin or Mr. Smeltzer talking about it. They have smaller cables in they can have the option of putting numerous smaller cables in, which gives us a little bit more flexibility. The other part of it too is when we look at serving fiber to the home, there is a fiber optic standard that is ideally tailored for providing the best performance. And that fiber isn't necessarily the best fiber for providing the best long haul performance. And so we need to be a little careful about using existing fiber to make sure that we don't degrade our reach capabilities, which will then increase our costs.
Understood. Thank you.
And Brad, one thing I just wanted to kind of finish with, I apologize. Two quick things. One, just kind of wrapping up our thoughts here. One, I didn't mention this, but obviously Finley has multiple offices in a number of locations, but I actually live in Illinois out of our Springfield office, so I'm really close to you guys. I could about throw a rock at you if I need to come up. And as far as being a local resource, I'm really in your backyard, so I could be up there quickly if needs be. We'll have team members like Dean's group will probably come down and do some physical assessment as part of our efforts. But the other thing I want to leave you with, and this is a real specialty of Doug Dawson and CCG, is the end result or the report that we give to the county that does encompass the totality of our work is Doug's a master. He writes his own blog on telecommunications and various things. You can follow his thing online if you look him up. But he's a very plain-spoken, no-nonsense kind of writer. And our intention is not to give you a manual that sits on a shelf and collects dust. The intention, knowing we have this background to do this work, and Doug knows how to talk the talk and give you the detail in clear spoken English. Our point is to give you an action plan that can be taken with and is shovel ready to take off for the county. I just want to make sure that's a clear point, because we don't do this just for the heck of it. We see that you want to be able to build this thing, and we want to give you the tool that helps you do it.
Sure.
If I could add to that, there's a couple other key points to go with it. Sean mentioned that, we got into the feasibility study, about 2.5 years ago. We did it in self-defense. What would happen is these entities would go through and do a feasibility study, and then they would turn it over to build. And so we'd bid on the build portion of it, because that's what we do. We're a get it done type group. And we'd be the one to have to tell them that, you know what, you're half short on your dollars. And so when we found out that Doug was doing this and Doug knew of us, that's how we teamed together. The other part of what Doug will provide and what we provide is that the numbers that Doug creates are of sufficient quality that you can take to bonding boards, you can take to other entities who have the desire to help you build, and they will realize that they're getting actual financial information that will help them make an accurate decision. Not a very high level, well, it's going to be X number of dollars per mile type thing. He will break down all of the other things necessary to make this operate. So we see a lot of studies, and we've actually backed out of somewhere. All they want is a feasibility study with no intelligence behind it. Anybody can write that. Our goal is to actually give you a product you can use and walk away with and continue to use, rather than just, well, yeah, you know, you need broadband. We could have saved you a few dollars on that.
And I will tell you, Dean, that was one of the things that impressed me when I read your proposal was the reliability of your numbers and how past customers have used those numbers to be successful, not only right out of the gate, but for long-term planning purposes. So I was very pleased to see that in your proposal and as you just shared.
Yeah,
good.
Guys, I've got a question of whoever wants to answer it. Maybe talk a little bit about your communication that you'll have. Obviously, there's a final report, but what do you anticipate the communication will be with, whether it be the committee, a smaller group? How do you envision that? Or what is your past experience with that?
I can take that, Sean, if you'd like.
Sure.
So actually, one of my goals today was to find out who I should start directing requests for information to. One of the things that helps with getting this study as accurate as possible is to get a hold of as much GIS information as we can that shows where establishments are at, maybe parcels and where they do encroach upon the right-of-way, things like that. So you're going to find a flurry of information from both Doug and I as we get the project started. You're going to hit a kind of a silent period where we got our heads down. We got so much stuff that we don't know what to do with, and we're digging through it. Doug will probably be in touch with you more often than I will, simply because he's dealing with getting things rolling earlier, whereas my work kind of stretches through the middle and it's just slog it out. You know, we compile a tremendous amount of data and we have to work it through and make sure we have it done right, and it's just takes time. So I will be more quiet through the middle of this study. Doug will be more busy at the beginning, at the end, as he's and actually pretty much all the way through as he's working on the study and his parts of it. If you want, we can attend a limited number of meetings like this. We don't want to spend every Tuesday or whatever, because that just slows us down from all the other things we're supposed to be getting done. But if it's a once a month report, that's certainly something that one of us can look at attending.
You talk about
my question. I'm sorry. That was going to be my question. How often will we hear updates?
So at least once a month. The updates are going to be kind of boring. My update will be, okay, we've got all the GIS data pulled in, sorted, and determined what we're missing. We're chasing those parts down. And then it's going to be turning the design group loose to go figure out the best way to maximize the ability to serve the area with the least amount of investment. And that's just iteration upon iteration of, does this work, and what's the better solution? So you're going to get kind of bigger pictures, because we really won't know the answer until we get to the end. I mean, we have some ideas, and certainly, you know, as Sean says, he lives in Illinois. I was very active in Illinois for about 10 years, working with our Illinois group that was under my my management, and so I was in Illinois a lot, working in the area. So it's just, we got to slog it through.
Thank you.
Yeah. Andy, you got comments on Doug's?
Yeah, I was going to kind of walk through a little bit of a formal, maybe a formal process here, Dean. We will start I'll call the formal piece of this, where we do the data inquiry, and I know Doug will want to have one a project kickoff meeting with the stakeholders we have right here, because I'm sure that there are more people we need to be talking to from education, healthcare, public safety, additional potential city and county government individuals. Just as Dean already said, we have to gather a lot of information up front. And again, we've kind of talked a lot about infrastructure type things. And Miss Burnett brought up a good point earlier too, is there's a lot of information that Doug is going to be asking for. And we're going to be looking at too with GIS layers. Is a big part of what we need to understand is, what does the market look like? What are the current uses? What is the value proposition of broadband? And what are the broadband gaps? And broadband gaps can exist in several different areas. One is just, as we've already talked, straight infrastructure. If you don't have the ability to even connect, that's a broadband gap. And then we have the other ones that primarily fall along, the digital literacy lines, and then also affordability, we know, can be a very, very big one. And so we need to understand all those elements, because, at the end of the day, all of us may be able to create the largest and biggest, network that is this glorious masterpiece of technology. But if nobody can use it, and it's not affordable, and it doesn't actually meet the needs of your community, which, we have to dig through a lot of details to understand that, it's kind of just, this big monolithic structure that really doesn't benefit the community to the best advantage, knowing we don't have unlimited, funding to pull this off either. So there's a lot of questions, and thank you, Ms. Burnett, for kind of commenting on some of the other pieces that we have to fall into here. That we will ask a lot of questions. We're going to be asking for additional stakeholder involvement so we can get the right information. And I guess my experience, having done multiple of these over the past several years, is, we're going to come and ask a set of questions, and we're going to get a set of answers back. Most of the time, I'm going to follow up with multiple questions after that, because I'm looking for more information, or there's a comment that somebody makes that leads me down another path that we need to identify something else that's an underlying factor maybe in your community that we really need to understand. How big of an impact it is, and is it something we need to really think about as we talk about engagement with the community.
Sure.
So
Back to the question Dean had, Sean, maybe you can help me out. I remember you were on an email, as was Kathy Larson. There's some intent that there's some more frequent communication with a much smaller group. I think, if I remember that list right, and Sean shaking his head, or Kathy, please help me, it was Samantha and I, Darlene Kleppel, Kathy Larson, and maybe MC. Is that the five of us? We're going to be a little more nimble in communicating with you more frequently.
yes, I believe that was one of the intents, and you're correct in the way, well, Dean and Andy have laid this out. That's how this is going to kind of work. We're going to have regular requests of somebody that's actionable on your side, and probably that doesn't need to go to a wide distribution. Dean's going to make a request. I need GIS data, and he needs it to funnel appropriately. So obviously, if that can be nimble, is the best word I could. If I could steal it, I'd use that exact same thing. And the same thing when Doug starts, he's going to say, okay, we're going to start surveys. Who wants to approve the survey that's going out? This is the language we're using. So it's going to be, we're going to have those kinds of things. If it's a nimble group, we can keep it moving we'll keep the pace and the meter moving along well.
Yeah, and there is absolutely positively no intent to cut the rest of the committee out.
Correct.
But it's that being able to make decisions and move in a fashion that keeps us moving forward on a good pace, I think was the intent of having the five of us kind of be the initial communication, and then you guys would report regularly to the full committee, but maybe more frequently to us through that type of process.
That would be completely acceptable. And and I can always be your point of contact. Obviously, you know, anytime you need Finley, you can just throw it to me and make it really simple. I'll get the right team members. So I can act as that liaison for us. But you're right. As long as we can funnel those back and keep the process, anytime you need that kind of wide status update, we'll stop and we'll provide whatever you need. That's totally acceptable. Yep.
Other questions from the committee for Sean, Dean, or Andy? I don't see any hands raised. How about from you guys? Anything tonight that you're needing, or questions for us from your standpoint?
I don't, I believe we talked a little bit about the timeline. I know Darlene and I went back and forth about that a little bit. And I know as far as the work extent, you know, there's an issue with the committee about how much work we're going to do in 21 versus how much we're about to roll into 22. But I know that's part of the consideration, but we can at least start these data requests and start crunching, because obviously we want to stay ahead of that and meet delivery timelines. But we know we're conscious of the fact that you guys are a political organization, and we do have to work around your the constraints that Darlene laid out for me there. So we're aware of that, but I don't know if there's anything to add, but she had kind of laid that out for me and given me some structure for that.
Dean, Andy, anything you guys want to add as we're kind of winding down a little bit here tonight?
I think I'm the engineer side of things. So for me, it's numbers and facts and figures. But you know, Andy raises a good point too. Is helping us get a flavor of the community and the needs of the community. I mean, we have some ties. I actually lived in Rantoul, the Air Force Base, for a year in 74, 75. I grew up on a small farm in southwest Minnesota, so I'm very familiar with corn and soybeans and hogs and cattle and everything else. But even with that, each local area has its flavor, and to know that is beneficial to us.
I would agree. Every community I'm sure you work in is unique. So the more you can understand about it, the better report and the better results you're going to put forward.
Yep. Absolutely. We when we do these, I'm just going to say virtually every time we say we don't come into these with any preconceived notions. That's why we dig and we ask a lot of questions about facts and numbers and information, because every community is very unique, and we have to understand all the things that make communities work, the people that live in them, because that's how we have to understand what's going to make this successful. And that's also a large driver why we really want to know stakeholders, because many times to make things work, it takes a broadband champion, and understanding who those stakeholders and champions are is how things can be successful. After we're done with the work we need to do. Because then it becomes reality.
Yeah.
Samantha, I see you've got your hand raised. Yes.
Real quick, just wanted to ask them, is this one of the biggest projects that you guys have worked on?
I would say for me, Samantha, no, I've done multiple county studies, very similar in size, working on a 6-county project here in Missouri at the moment. It's fairly typical of a full county study that we do. There's some, obviously, like I said before, there's wrinkles to every single one of these. So there's always some piece of them that make them more challenging than others. And we will find what that is about Champaign County.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, Andy. And I'd add, we do feasibility for counties. We do them directly for municipalities. We do them for utilities. So we everybody has their own little unique, and there's obviously scope and size and scale based on how big each of those are. But we've done enough of them that I guess it won't be unique in the effort, the approach and everything, but we kind of already have an idea how we would tackle this, even in with your scope and size. I guess that's our point.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'm looking, I feel a little bit like Wheel of Fortune here. I'm looking at the big board, and if you're not familiar, I'm sitting here at Brookins. I've got a laptop in front of me, but then I've got the big screen. So if you see me looking like this, I'm looking at the big screen. And again, Vanna White's not here, nor is Pat Sajak, but I feel like I'm looking at Wheel of Fortune here. So
I would,
Dean, did you have?
Yes, to Ms. Carter's question. Great question, and maybe a little better feel for that. I grew up in a small town. I live in a small town. I live in an area without broadband. Guess what my passion is? We see a lot of entities that are trying to get broadband built where there's already 3 providers working in the community to do it in the large cities, what have you. For me, my real interest is getting it out into the rural, because my folks still live in a rural community without broadband. And like I said, I live in a rural community without broadband. So yes, there is a desire to meet the small community needs also.
Absolutely. So the next item on our agenda, then, I think we've got the questions answered, is, and Sean, maybe you can help us a little bit here too, is setting our next meeting date. Sean, when would you anticipate you would need to visit with us? Because as I look at my notes here in front of me, there isn't much for us to, as of right now, for a committee to work on. Nobody wants to meet just for the heck of it. We all are busy. When would you anticipate? Maybe you can give us a little bit of guidance. Is it a month from now? Is it, oh no, you guys need to meet in 2 weeks. We may be ready to visit with you again.
Yeah, and this is an interesting one, because the first thing that's going to happen are a series of these data requests. And I think once we have some guidance on what that's going to take to pull, I think that's when it makes sense to set a next kind of status meeting and see where we're at with either fulfilling those requests or additional guidance needed. I mean, guys, what do you think? I think 2 weeks seems too short if we're going to make requests and wait for data this first time. Do you have any thoughts otherwise on that? I'm thinking a month out, but maybe I'm too far out.
A month might be too far for me. I will be getting a email out here at my earliest convenience, which is a little tough right now. I've got 2 speaking engagements in the next less than a week's time, so I'll be traveling a bit. So my goal is to have a request out to the group sometime before the end of next week while I'm sitting on the airplane or something, get that typed up. Obviously I have a lot of my questions already pre-prepared from other projects. But I will look to get that out. Doug, I'm sure, will also be working on getting his thing started, but he tends to lag us a little bit in the start simply because he knows we need the information and we need to keep the group focused on getting that information to us first.
Well, Tuesday the 9th is 2 weeks from today. Would that be appropriate for us to try to set something in that time frame or on that day, and then go ahead and, even if it's whichever group that you'd like, Brad, and we go ahead and get something on the calendar. I'm a firm believer of, we decided it, let's put it on the calendar, and then if it needs to change, it can be, but we've already set it. Happy to do so.
Would you have anything to look at by that, Dean, or are we still going to be trying to acquire data at that point in time?
No, well, yeah, actually, Andy, what typically happens is there's always questions about what I asked for.
Okay. That's what I'm wondering.
So that would give them a week to talk it over and think about it and come back with questions, or say, hey, this is a slam dunk for us. We can provide this with no problem.
Okay. I'd suggest the 9th if that works for anybody.
And Mary, I see you have your hand raised. You were going to be who I was going to call on. Mary, can you talk about the master calendar for the county and maybe give those of us on this committee that are not on the county board a refresher of the meeting schedule for the county board?
Okay, Tuesday, November 9th will be a committee of the whole meeting. Those are typically the second Tuesday of the month, and then county board is typically the third Thursday.
Mary, what time does the committee of the whole meeting start?
They start at 6:30.
6:30. Sean, Dean, Andy, how much time do you need? Would you anticipate? Is it an hour? Is it 45 minutes? Is it, oh boy, it's an all-nighter?
Dean, you're muted.
Usually this is a nuts and bolts call. So it may not be appropriate for the entire group unless they want to listen to questions on details. But typically a half hour for what I have is sufficient.
That's what I was thinking too.
MC, I see you've got your hand raised. Give me just a minute. Mary, would it be appropriate for us to meet on the 9th at 6 o'clock? And the 5 individuals, meaning myself, Samantha, MC, Darlene, and Kathy for sure, but the rest of the committee would be invited to attend if they would like, and start that at 6 o'clock and know that we have to conclude by 6:30.
See, Kyle is on here. Are there caucus meetings? I know sometimes they have caucus meetings before the committee of the whole and the board meeting.
Could you say the date again?
November the 9th. Dean had tossed out, and Sean for that matter, had tossed out maybe 30 minutes. So 6 o'clock, but we may just say 5:45 just to make sure we got a little bit of extra for Samantha and Darlene to jump off of that and to get logged into their committee of the whole meeting.
So I'm not sure if the caucus for next month has been set. We have been meeting the day before, but since we're back in person, I'm not positive if that's going to change. But I mean, I could look into that, but obviously it doesn't help us right now. So.
Guys, let's hold this a second. Let me get a couple hands off the big board here. MC?
Yes, sir. Just want to make sure I heard correctly. The questions would be coming to us by the end of next week, or was that the end of this week?
Dean, I believe, had tossed out the end of next week.
The end of next week, yes.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if we're not getting the initial email with the questions till the end of next week, we probably wouldn't be able to, clarify any follow-up questions we have and be able to turn around the data by the beginning of that following week.
No, I don't expect the data to be delivered by that time, but maybe just to get a better understanding of what I'm looking for.
Gotcha. Okay. I was thinking the back and forth was going to be happening via email. Okay. So we're going to get an email with the questions and then we'll be meeting to, okay. Got it. Thank you.
Mike, you had your hand up.
This may be a good thing as opposed to a bad thing. I'm going to be gone from the 8th through the 18th. If this could happen the Friday of the week before, I could participate, but 8th through the 18th, I will not be able to.
Okay. No, I mean, your participation at not only on the committee, it's important. So
I could make the 5th work. What time would you guys want to do on a non-committee meeting? Is it always an evening time like this, or do you ever meet during the day, or how does that work?
So, Sean, this is only our second meeting, and it just so happens both meetings have been of an evening. But that is a good question. It's
virtual, so I didn't know if that works or not. I mean, obviously, we can accommodate anytime we're working during the day, so it doesn't matter to us. So.
How about this, guys? We could probably spend the next 15 minutes trying to find a date. Why don't I try to do some things as the chair with Sean and Dean and his team and the committee, and try to do some things over email and try to find a date that works. How about that? Because we're just going to sit here and all of us are very busy individuals. Why don't we try that approach? And I'll work on that this week.
Sounds good.
MC, your hand is raised.
Apologies, sir. Didn't put it back down from the last time.
Okay. If I don't hear any complaints on that, I'll take that on of trying to find something that works for all of us over the next couple of weeks. And that'll be, I'll communicate with everybody via email. All right, I see head shaking. All right, the last thing is chair's report, and I have made mistakes all night on this with introductions. Kathy Larson, it is your turn to introduce yourself and talk about your role with our committee, and I believe the ARPA funds overall, if you could explain that.
Yes, good evening. I'm Kathy Larson. I'm the Economic Development Specialist for the Champaign County Regional Planning Commission. And I'm assisting the county with management of the ARPA funds and ARPA projects. And so as related to broadband, of course, that's a major qualifier for ARPA funds, as long as it adheres to all the regulations and things involved. And as long as the county board would like to proceed with broadband as a project that can be funded. There is some money set aside for this next year for broadband purposes to at least get this study completed and then consider the options from there and see if there's any work that should be taken on in 2022. So I will be part of the internal discussions. I work under Darlene for this. So any communications, related to ARPA, we both would be the contacts for that. And I'll be trying to make sure that we follow any ARPA regulations for whatever's approved to fund broadband projects under that funding.
Thanks, Kathy. Before you mute, I have one question. You mentioned it, but let's just say it. In the proposed ARPA budget for 2022, there is $3 million set aside for broadband, correct?
Correct.
For 2022 fiscal year.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Any questions for Kathy while we've got her? And I assume, as I mentioned earlier, Kathy is part of that smaller group that'll be part of the communication. And I assume Kathy will be joining the committee at least periodically, if not every meeting.
That's correct.
Dean, you have your hand raised.
Just a quick question. What is your fiscal year?
It is the calendar year is our fiscal year.
Okay. And that actually may not be so bad, because by the time the study is completed and you look to start taking action, you really won't have a chance to get a lot done in 2022. So I think that was a good wise choice not to try to put a lot of money into 2022.
Well, one thing that the county board did was to go ahead and allocate half of the ARPA funding for next budget year, proposed in the current proposed budget for next year, assuming that next May or June we would get the second round of ARPA funds. But until that happens, they just wanted to commit what's already in the bank for ARPA funding. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, that is all I have for chair's report. Is there anything else for the good of the cause tonight? I'm looking at my phone here. We will be an hour and a half if you look at it, which is not bad for a meeting. So is there any other questions or comments for tonight? If not, everybody, I really appreciate your time this evening. Again, I will be communicating with both the committee and then the Finley and CCG to discuss and try to find a next meeting date. So please be watching your email for that, and we will go from there. If not, everybody, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Good night.